Hi, my name is Tom Mauser, and I am the father of Daniel Mauser. Daniel Mauser was one of the students who was killed at Columbine High School in 1999. And I have been an advocate for stronger gun laws ever since then. I've been working this issue for a couple of reasons. One is first that just 2 weeks before the tragedy of Columbine, my son Daniel asked me a question out of the blue at the dinner table. He said, "Dad, did you know there were loopholes in the Brady Bill?" And I knew what the Brady Bill was, but no, I didn't really know there were loopholes, and I really didn't engage him in conversation. 2 weeks later, he was killed with a gun that was purchased at a gun show through one of those loopholes in the Brady Bill, the gun show loophole. How could I not act on that? And that's what really motivated me into action. Um, I became a lobbyist the year after Columbine, working for an organization called Safe Colorado. It was an organization made up of three board members who were Democrats and three who were Republicans. It was bipartisan. People who wanted to see something done in response to the tragedy of Columbine. And when our legislature failed to take any action on a number of bills that were introduced, we took one of the most important one of those issues, the gun show loophole, to the voters of Colorado. We put it on the ballot to close the gun show loophole. We gathered the signatures, we did the advertising, and we closed that loophole. The voters of Colorado closed that loophole by a vote of 70% to 30%. You know, when you're getting 70% of the people to vote for something, in a state back then, it was pretty much a much more a pro-gun state. When you can get 70% of the people to agree on anything, it's an amazing thing. But here we closed that gun show loophole by a vote of the people. After that, we had an organization called Colorado Ceasefire set up, and we have been lobbying for that. Uh, for stronger gun laws in Colorado ever since. What's especially motivated me, besides Daniel's words, were the fact that I know that there's other people who've been affected by gun violence who, for any number of reasons, don't speak up. They just feel they can't. It's too difficult. I feel that I'm speaking for them. So I understand the pain they're going through. It was a terrible experience that we had at Columbine. In the case of my son, he was unfortunately one of the students who was in the library at Columbine. He was like the other students, under a desk and facing two shooters who went from table to table and decided life and death, who was going to be shot and who wasn't. Daniel was one of the last ones to be shot. The shooter looked at him, insulted him, called him names, fired a shot into his hand, a relatively harmless shot. At that point, Daniel pushed the chair at the shooter, the chair that was in front of him. And for that, he paid for that with his life, with a shot to his face. I was determined I didn't want to see other people go through this kind of pain. Been working on the issue ever since. And I've learned so much about this issue. And you know what I've especially learned is we have half of our population, a majority of people actually, who support their right to bear arms. But also more than a half also agree on the need to regulate that right. They understand the need to regulate that right to bear arms. And that's what this is all about. Most of the people are in the middle, but they want to see action done. And what just really amazes me that we have over 90% of Americans, supporting universal background checks. And yet we can't get that through Congress. It's shameful. Do we have a democracy? Do people matter when over 90% of Americans support something so basic as universal background checks and we can't get it through Congress? That's shameful. It's really, really shameful. So we really need to take some action. We need to have a national policy. We can't just have this state by state. There are a number of things that have to be done at the national level. Why? Well, in particular, because of gun trafficking. Guns and criminals cross state boundaries just as easily as an automobile does. And for that reason, because they cross state lines, that is a federal issue. We need the federal government to act on that, to make it clear that we're going to do something about this trafficking. I have a lot of people comment to me, what has been done since Columbine? Why have we done nothing since Columbine? And the fact is, at the federal level, we have done nothing. In fact, if anything, it's been made much worse. What we have seen is we've given immunity to the gun industry from lawsuits. We have seen the forced ending of the assault weapons ban. We have seen a weakening of the ATF, alcohol. I forgot the ATF, BATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. We've seen a weakening of that agency, even though we have a gun lobby that says we should enforce the laws that we have on the books. Well, who do you expect to enforce the gun laws? The ATF, and yet the gun lobby consistently fights against the ATF. It's really shameful. It's hypocritical. We have also seen that the Congress has refused to even close the gun show loophole that was such an important part of what happened, what went wrong at Columbine, the gun show loophole. They refused to even close that. When I campaigned for the ballot amendment to close the gun show loophole, it was very clear when I spoke to audiences. They understood it. They got it. But you have a situation where a person, a criminal, or a domestic abuser, or somebody who's mentally deranged can walk into a gun show and go to one table and have to go through a background check to buy a gun and be denied. Just walk across the aisle to a table of a private seller, buy a gun, no questions asked, no background check. People get it that that's wrong. And when you can't even close that loophole, I mean, let's get real. We need to do something. We need to have a national policy to address this epidemic. We have to do more than just simply arming teachers or throwing more money at mental health, when studies have shown that people who have mental illness are a small portion of people who commit gun violence. A small portion of them are people who have mental health diagnoses. A very small portion. More money for school security. Well, schools have already been doing this. We know it. And what we have seen, shamefully, is part of that are the drills that our children are having to go through. Frightening active shooter drills. We need to do much more than just that. Much, much more. And we shouldn't be blaming people who have mental health issues for this gun violence in America. It's really, we're already dealing with the stigma that's behind mental health treatment, and we shouldn't be making it worse by just saying, oh, this is a mental health issue. I think it's just disgusting how little we have been doing. When you look at other countries that are like us, and they have such a small amount of gun violence compared to us. And I hear people say, well, our problem here is unrest and people who are disgruntled, and it's mental illness and it's drugs, those same problems. They have the same problems. Alcohol abuse, drug abuse, people who are disgruntled, troubled marriages, they have those things too. But they don't have this level of gun violence that we have. They do not have it. What is different between them and us? We have to get past this. We have to show that we are a country that can deal with our problems and not just you know, ignore them and pretend that they will just simply go away. This problem is not going to go away by doing nothing. It will not go away. So I urge Congress to do something. Do something meaningful. Do something common sense. It's been made clear to you what things need to be done. And you need to listen to the voice of the people and not to an industry that only cares about more sales. We have to get away from that. We have to do what brings people safety. Thank you very much for listening.